Episode 168 brings the great Larry Stone with us here at Puck Sports, pucksports.com. Of course, you're watching on YouTube, listening right now on Apple and Spotify. And we're doing kind of an emergency episode 168 with Larry. As we record this Tuesday night, we just got word a few hours ago the passing of the great Willie Mays. And you were the first person I thought of. The very, very first person. I just know your love affair for the sport of baseball. Obviously, your love affair because this is the area in which you grew up in. You're a Bay Area kid, and you are an encyclopedia of baseball knowledge. I'll just start with when you heard the news of his passing. You probably thought something was up because the other day was yesterday. He wasn't going to go attend the game in Birmingham, obviously for health reasons. But when you heard the news here on Tuesday that he had passed, what immediately went through your mind?
Well, just sadness. It really is the end of an era. I think to people of my age, I'm in my 60s. Willie Mays is an absolute icon with Hank Aaron. You know, the same stature. I think that people of your generation think of Michael Jordan. He was a towering figure, and just probably the greatest baseball player I've ever seen. Probably any of us have ever seen. He just could do it all. I was correct. One thing you said, I was an LA kid. I wasn't a Bay Area kid. I moved to the Bay Area after college. I went to Cal and then worked in the Bay Area, but I grew up in LA.
So you were more of that's right. You were more of a Dodgers fan then.
I was a Dodger fan. And the last 2 weeks, I mean, we've lost three giants, Bill Walton, Jerry West, and Willie Mays, three huge figures in my youth in the 60s. All three of them, have a connection to the two of them, of course, were from LA. And Willie Mays was the arch nemesis of the Sandy Koufax Dodger teams that I worshiped. And they played him 18 times a year. And those games were just epic battles between the Dodgers and the Giants in those days because they were both great. Juan Marichal, Willie Mays, Willie McCovey on one side, and then Drysdale, Koufax, Maury Wills on the other. And I just lived and died with those games. And Willie Mays broke my heart on more than one occasion with his greatness.
What do you remember the first time watching him? How old were you? Do you recall that?
Probably. I was on board at age 4 or 5. You can ask my parents. I just latched on to baseball, and the Dodgers. The Dodgers were my life from age 5 to about 17. And then I went off to college, and then once I became a working journalist, it all disappeared because you just can't have that kind of fandom. But those Dodger teams of the 60s were everything to me. Vince Scully, listening to Vince Scully on the transistor radio, you've heard those stories. They were true. There was a whole generation of kids in Southern California who listened to every game, with a transistor radio, under the covers until the game was over.
What was it like then to watch and admire him from afar, though, as a rival to your favorite team growing up, Larry?
Yeah, it was he was the guy that him and McCovey were the two you had to stop, and I rooted fervently against him, but I also recognized his greatness. Everybody recognized his greatness, and he was just universally regarded as the player in baseball. Like, again, it was Jordan-esque, the kind of impact he had, that aura that was above just a great player. There was an aura about him.
What was his style like? Like, can you compare him to a more of a modern day player in terms of the way that he played and the way that he carried himself on and off the field?
Well, he played with a real spark and joy. I think there's a lot of Griffey in Mays, in more ways than one. I think the image of Griffey as the joyful kid with the hat backwards. Mays was always running out of his hat and the basket catch, but off the field, both of them could be a little prickly at times too. I got
a little surly, right? He kind of had a surly nature to him, correct?
He kind of did. When I grew up and went to the Bay Area. I covered the Giants for 10 years, and Mays was around spring training all the time. I interacted with him, and he could be difficult for sure. He liked to be left alone. He didn't like to do interviews. He called the writers writer. Hey, writer, I don't want to talk to you today, writer.
That sounds so much like Griffey.
Yeah, and they were very close too. When Griffey moved back to the Mariners in 2009, remember he was debating whether to sign with Atlanta and or the Mariners, kind of agonizing. He called up Willie Mays, or Willie Mays actually called up him to advise him that he should go back to the Mariners for his legacy. And I actually called Willie Mays to get the story about his conversation with Griffey. My friend John Shea, who is now he became the Mays whisperer. He's incredibly close to Mays for the last 10 or 15 years. He wrote a book called 24, which if you have any interest in Willie Mays, you should read. But John got me his number and asked Willie if he would talk to me. So I mean, just to pick up my cell phone and dial his number and hear Willie Mays was like,
what's that like though, Larry? What's that like as the 12-year-old that grew up watching the Dodgers and watching him, watching him beat your Dodgers at times, and your Dodgers are beating the Giants as well. But what is that like? Because I know you said, hey, once you become a journalist, it goes away, but somewhere down deep, it is still in there, right? That love
absolutely
for that sport and that love for that team.
Well, the reverence for Mays is still in there. That's what I felt. It wasn't really, it wasn't really connected to the Dodgers. It was just, here I am talking to Willie Mays. How cool is that I dialed his number, which, by the way, his phone number was 2424, number 24. Yeah. I can't remember what the prefix was, but the last four numbers were 2424. Which, and his car, I think he drove a Rolls, and the license plate was say hey 24.
Is it true? I was reading reading a bunch about him, and Frank, I remember my first introduction into Willie Mays. This is going to be so weird, but it's going to be timely because of my age, and obviously I knew of him before this. But it really became popular in my mind, Larry, was the movie Major League.
Yeah.
Willie Mays Hayes. Run like Hayes. Remember that? Anyway, he runs like Hayes, but he hits like shit. Remember that? Willie Mays Hayes. I just like Willie Mays Hayes. What a great. Yeah, and I remember, and then so that kind of like sparked something to kind of learn more about him and regretful that you never got to see. Regretful that you never got to see guys like that play. Because, I know in 30, 40, 50 years, whatever it is, there's going to, like my son, right? I guess he can watch YouTube clips of Jordan. He's never seen Michael Jordan play. And so you get into these debates all the time, right? Oh, he's the greatest ever. There's no one ever like him. And I'm sure for people like you and others who got to see him play, they'll argue that there's never been a player ever like him. Maybe never again.
Yeah. Yeah, and you romanticize it over time and remember him probably as maybe a little greater than he really was, but he truly was great. I think if you probably look at the stats, you might make a case for other people, but to me, Jordan will always be the greatest to me. I don't care who comes along, and I think Mays is kind of in the same category that I'm going to remember him as the greatest. And you can parse your stats and everything else, but there was something special about him. He was a cut above.
You mentioned the story where he would say, "Hey, writer." I was reading. I'll finish my story, but I was reading where the nickname, the "Say Hey Kid," came out of that. He just wouldn't, not necessarily remember teammates' names, but he would just say "Hey" or say "Hey," and that's how it came about. Is that the lore of the Say Hey Kid?
That is indeed the lore, yeah. And, when he first came up with the Giants, Leo DeRocher, Hall of Famer, was the manager. And I think he started out like 1 for 20 or something, and he was afraid he was going to be sent down. And DeRocher said, reassured him that you're my center fielder no matter what you do, and he got hot and ended up
Right.
helping him to the World Series that year. That was the Bobby Thompson year, I believe.
Yeah.
And it took off from there. It's a shame. A lot of people remember when he went to the Mets late in his career and he stumbled in the outfield. Kind of that's part of his lore as well. And you hate to see it when great players kind of aren't great anymore at the end of their career. You see it with almost everyone. No one, people rarely go out on top, but I choose not to remember that at all. I choose to remember the great years with the Giants.
It's hard. Yeah, you don't ever want to see him then, right? You always want to see him at their very best. And I mean, you got a chance to see him at his very best. What is impact on today's game is what you think, in your opinion?
I think he showed that the speed, sort of a 5-tool player that I think he was one of the first to show what true athleticism and just having all the speed, the power, the showmanship, the defense, everything, the arm. I mean, the Vic Works catch, that's his calling card, his trademark, the backwards to the field catch, but then he whirled around and the throw was just as impressive. If you see that clip, he gets the ball in and holds the runner. Just kind of that ability to do everything, I think maybe paved the way for other players of that ilk who followed him.
I think today, I think you can. I mean, it's the greatest catch in Major League Baseball history, in the history of the sport.
It's got to be, just when you consider
of it, right? I mean, yeah, all of it.
Yeah, in the World Series to save a game, one of the first, television was in its infancy in those days. Just to have it captured on television that was no guarantee that. So you got to see it, and I think that added to it. In the grainy footage that you still see to this day. It's too bad if it happened now, we'd get 20 different angles and but maybe it's better that way, that you just see sort of a snippet of it. I don't know if the whole at bat or the follow-up exists. I think all I've ever seen is just those like 3 seconds, but
it's just that. Yeah, you're right. And him falling down, the hat flying everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's generally universally acknowledged as the greatest catch in baseball history.
You think about too his numbers, right? He's 6th in the history of the league in home runs. He's 12th in hits. He's 12th in RBIs. He missed about 2 full seasons of baseball. I think, and that I didn't even know that about him.
Yeah,
I didn't even know that until I was reading up on it today. That he missed 2 full seasons of baseball because of the Korean War. He was drafted, never had to serve, but he sat out for 2 years. Think about that, and then he comes right back, and then he just takes off without even skipping a beat. It's pretty crazy. I mean, imagine if he never skipped those 2 years of baseball.
Between that and Ted Williams, also all the years he lost to the war, but he not only missed 2 years; they were 2 years in his prime. He was 21 and 22. So, he probably would have added 80 homers at least, and he would have broken Babe's record before Hank. And the other thing to remember, Puck, is that he played at Candlestick in the wind, the swirling wind there, which probably cost him a lot of homers too. I
read something where when they moved over to the stick, that he figured the wind, how the wind would come off. He learned, and I'm telling you this as if you don't know, and I know you know all this stuff because you're again just an encyclopedia of baseball. But I was fascinated by it because of how at the peak of their career, the incredible athletes that they all are can kind of change their ways and change how they swing a bat and what they do. He learned to change his swing to the point where he would hit it more to right field because he knew because of the wind, it would be easier to hit it to right field. I mean, that's just like,
Yeah, that's
that's
amazing.
incredible.
But it's
when you
still
think about that.
it still cost him lots
Sure.
of homers. I'm convinced
Yeah.
of that because he did.
Yeah.
You know, your pull power is greater than your opposite field power. So
Right.
So it would have been amazing to see what he could have done with those 2 war years and playing, you know, in a more conducive park than
It's almost
Kansas.
criminal, Larry. Yeah, it's almost criminal that when you look back on his career, and I think about this actually with Griffey a lot too. Only 2 MVPs. Doesn't it just, when you look at his numbers and his years, doesn't it just seem like he should have a lot more than 2?
Yeah, but just think about who his contemporaries were in the National League.
No.
He had Hank Aaron. He had
Pretty good.
Frank Robinson for a time. He had Roberto Clemente. So, you know, there were, and all the Big Red Machine with Bench and Rose. So, you know, there was lots of competition for those MVP awards.
I know,
For
but
sure.
it's just like you look at that run from 61. I'm looking at his stats right now. That run from 61 to 65. I mean, it's just, you know, it's incredible. I mean, it's 40 and 123, 49 and 141, 38, 103, 47 and 111, 52 and 112. I mean, all and every one of those years hitting over 300, except for one, where he was hitting 296. Just insane.
He came really close to 40-40. One year he had 36 homers and 40 steals, and another year, 35 and 38. And he always said, "Man, we never talked about 40-40. If I knew it was going to be such a big deal, I would have done it." So, but that was I mean, look at his stolen base totals. He stole regularly 40 bases a year early in his career, or close to 40.
Yeah, a good stretch, a good 4 or 5 year stretch over that. Yeah.
Yeah. In addition to the power, 20 triples one year. And if, you know, look, modern stats, his WAR is calculated as 156.2, which I'm pretty sure is surpassed only by Ruth and Bonds, maybe Bonds. So, you know, by modern stats, he stands up as well.
In your conversations, no doubt, with Ken Griffey Jr., and of course he wore number 24 over the years, and in the name Willie Mays came up. What do you recall of Griffey in your conversations with him, reminiscing about him?
Oh, total reverence. And they talked often, is my understanding. I mean, Junior released a statement a few minutes ago in which it was really heartfelt statement about how much Willie meant to him in his career and how he would frequently call him for advice. There's not many people, I think, that Junior fully respected for their and viewed as a superior when it come to baseball talent. But he was Willie Mays, and I think Griffey, coming from a baseball family and all that, knew what that meant, knew how great he was, and I think he had total respect for that, and I think they were as close to being peers as you're going to get with center fielders. You know, there was a lot, like I said earlier, there was a lot of Mays and Griffey. You know, injuries kind of robbed him of a lot of what he could have been. But there was a stretch there where I think he was the new Griffey or the new Mays.
He said in a statement that was released by the Mariners, as Larry said about an hour or so ago. Well, we're recording this, so you know it was released on Tuesday. I got to remind myself of that all the time. He said, quote, "I'm at a loss for words. I'm devastated, heartbroken, numb. Been lucky enough to know Willie since I was a little kid. My appreciation only grew over time from the stories, the videos, and then meeting him. He was a true giant on and off the field, a person I looked up to, respected, a friend, and someone I could call when I needed to talk, who always had time for me and my best interest in mind. I considered him an uncle, and then to me, he will always be the godfather of all center fielders." One thing I was thinking about, still to this day, and I remember we handed out jerseys the other day the baseball all-star team, and these kids are 11, and the first number that they couldn't wait to get was 24.
Yeah.
I mean, just and it's I think that number, what that number carries. Now for them, it's not Mays, but they've seen Griffey. But it's that number. Like when you see someone wearing 24 playing baseball, you're like, well, that guy better be good. Because that's that, you know what I mean, right? Because that's a number.
Yeah.
You got to be good to wear 24. You can't be sitting on the bench wearing 24.
Right. There's three numbers I think that are iconic in that way. There's 24, there's 32, which to me is Koufax, and then 44, Aaron and McCovey. And you know, I thought it was interesting that Julio took 44. There's a lot of pressure with taking that number, but
yeah,
you know, along with 42, of course, with Jackie. But those are the baseball numbers to me, and 24 probably stands above them all just because of Mays.
Yeah, it's Mays and Griffey, and it's just I don't know, it's just the way that it looks for some reason. And we go back to maybe what you said earlier, we romanticize so much, but I think it's just the way that 24 looks on the uniform. When I see someone, I don't care what it is, little league, high school, college, and I see them wearing 24, just my first thought is that must be the best player on the team.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think teams are, if they're smart, they'll reserve that for the best player and not give it to some scrub. You don't want to see some
not you and I.
Third baseman. Yeah, right. Yeah, we don't warrant 24.
We hate the compare game, and I know you hate it, but I'm going to ask you anyways. Is there anyone that reminds you in today's game at all of him?
You know, the last guy that really reminded me of him a little bit, and it's too bad he got hurt, was Eric Davis of the Reds, who he was as talented as anybody I've seen. You know, he could have been a 50-50 guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's not a center fielder, but Ellie De La Cruz, you know, he's electrifying in the way that, and he may end up being a center fielder someday too, I think. Nobody else jumps to mind, Puck. I'd have to think about it a little bit more. But you know, the next Willie Mays can be a curse. You know, there's been a few people over the years who have been dubbed the next Willie Mays, but nobody really has been.
Well, we lost a giant in the sports, and Ted Williams. I saw this quote. Ted Williams said they invented the All-Star game for Willie Mays. 24 times he played in the All-Star game. You know, it's like you. All right, you're the Willie Mays of columnists that this city has had over the years. Larry, I appreciate the emergency late visit here on a Tuesday remembering Willie Mays. Thank you so much for the visit.
All right, thanks, Pup.